Hello.
Good evening, Graham.
Hello, Charles.
Let's start with quite a heavyweight one. We started on the subject of, I think we decided that she was Pauline Boty, didn't we, last week, who has the Harrogate connection.
Mhm.
But more significantly, you wanted to look at two jarring moments in an otherwise brilliant new book about Pauline Boty, the most overlooked British pop artist of the 1960s until recently. I'm wondering whether you're referring to her as being overlooked because you've now spotted her talent, or actually this is the book that's done that.
No, she lay undiscovered after her tragic death in 1966
Yes.
for decades. I think the first retrospective to her work didn't happen for another 35 years. And although recently she has actually started to get good prices for her paintings, I think one sold for about 1 million about in the last 5 years. I
Mm.
mean, at one point, a lot of her paintings were actually in a shed at a farm, a family
Mm.
farm. They're just left there, taken away in a horse box after her death. So she was genuinely, not on the radar for quite a while. And when people did books about British pop art of the 60s, talk about Peter Blake and people like that, they never
Mm.
mentioned her. And so she's undergone a revival. In the book, but the book by Mark Crystal, which is published by Francis Lincoln on hardback, which only came out recently, called Pauline Boty, British pop art's soul sister. It is a great book, but it's the first proper biography she's ever had. And it's really intelligent, and it gives you the whole context and background, not just to like her art, but the times and the culture and the politics and all the personal relationships with all the main characters in the swaying 60s. And it asks a lot of questions. I like the book a lot because Mark Crystal asks a lot of questions about what it means, what she meant, how that happened, what it added up to. So it's an intelligent book, but there's a couple of major problems with it, which I find
Mm.
quite alarming. First of all, the whole book from the beginning to end is written in a tone of tragedy, like Pauline Boty didn't achieve enough and is a tragic figure. Now, okay, she did die in age 28 in 1966
Mm.
when she was diagnosed with cancer when she was already pregnant, and she had to decide whether to have the treatment straight away, which may or may not have saved her life, but that would be at the expense of her unborn child, or
Yeah.
whether to put the treatment off till she delivered her baby. So she took the decision to put the treatment off until she delivered the baby, which she did successfully, but then she died about 4 months later.
Yeah.
But that doesn't get away from the fact that that really wasn't her fault that she died.
No,
So it's not really
no.
a tragedy. It's
Yeah.
just terrible bad luck.
Yeah.
And also, during her life, she achieved so much. I mean, she was in plays, she was on TV, she was in films, she was a cultural commentator on the radio and in the media. She was intelligent, forthright. She had her own solo exhibitions quite early on in British pop art.
Mm.
She was hugely attractive. She was a trendsetter. She set fashions. She influenced Billy Liar, the movie. She influenced
Mhm.
Julie Christie's character in Billy Liar.
Yeah.
She knew everybody famous in the swinging 60s London. She's right at the heart of the scene. She
Mm.
was a massive achiever. And Mark Crystal perpetually writes her story like she hadn't actually achieved a lot. And I think, wow, she achieved an awful lot. She may have gone into obscurity after her death, but when she was alive, the idea that she hadn't achieved, it's just
Would
preposterous. So
not be true.
that's quite annoying. It's like he's determined to paint her life in tragedy. The other annoying thing is that because he deals with ideas, he has to
Mm.
deal with her feminism because she was a proto-feminist and a
Yeah.
very bold, intelligent, daring woman at a time when that was normal. So I'll read a little extract
Yeah,
from
please. Mm.
the book Pauline Boty, British Pop Art's Soul Sister, and it's a quote from film producer Tony Garnett, who was big in the 60s and 70s in Britain.
Mm.
And Tony Garnett says, Pauline was a force of nature with talent pouring out of her, and she just appeared in London, and everybody seemed to fall in love with her. She had a joy in her, a love of life, and she wasn't inhibited. She just tell it like she thought it was, cheekily, and a self-confidence, which for a respectable middle-class suburban girl brought up in the 50s, you don't remember the 50s, I do, and it was an awful decade. I'll tell you, you don't know where that came from. It was only just the beginning, really, of the second feminist movement. Women had not been had not been brought up to be assertive or to be themselves or to be sexual beings or to be free. So how she just burst open and became all those things, I don't know. So that's the sort of like incredible force of nature she was. So Mark Crystal rightly deals with her feminism, which he has to do. But the only trouble with that is that even while he's talking about her as a proto-feminist, he's asking questions of her, which to my mind go against her very feminism, in which make him sound very much like a man. So, for example, at one point in the book, she had lots of lovers. She was a free spirit before that became common. And he actually asked the question in print, was she promiscuous? Well, I don't remember Picasso or any rock star or Mick Jagger being asked in any books about them, was their behavior promiscuous? And it's the old story that if a man sleeps around, it's because he's very popular. If a woman sleeps around, it might not be, or it might be because she's promiscuous. So I found that fairly shocking. I mean, it's only a small part. It's only a small part of the book. It doesn't ruin the book, but it's a bit of a jarring moment. But the worst thing is that he questions her decision to actually give birth to her child over saving her own life by having treatment for her cancer. He questions that decision as being not the act of a feminist. And so there's a bit in the book where he writes, as a teenager, Pauline was determined to be a creator, to reinvent the idea of womanhood, to subvert expectation and convention. But a decade later, she seemingly felt so discouraged regarding her own accomplishments that she was prepared to die to give birth, seeing the baby as the only means by which she might endure all of value that she'd accomplished. That signature defines her impregnable narcissism. For what is it creating a motherless child, if not the acme of self-centeredness, remained intact? So he's saying that she basically saved her child's life as an act of narcissism because she didn't believe in the value of her own art. I mean, what? That's just a gobsmacking statement, and it's only a man could say that, because until you've actually become pregnant and you're going to have a child, how can you possibly know how you're going to feel? And as a man, he does not know what that feels like. And although isms are important, feminism, socialism, any ism's important, humanism is more important than any ism.
Exactly.
For her personal decision about her own future and their own body is way bigger than living up to any writer's definition of what feminism is or was. I can't believe he's written that, and it's such a brilliant book.
So Graham, it's not a case of the wrong person has written the book, just that some of the
No,
judgments you would challenge, kind of undermining and putting in a male perspective that actually is
I
opinion,
think.
but opinion more than fact.
Well, I love the fact he asks
Conjecture.
questions. I love the fact he tries to analyze the meaning of everything in Pauline's life. That's great. But I think if Pauline hadn't died and was still alive and had read those lines in that book, I don't think she'd be very pleased.
No.
And the tragedy continued because her husband, Clive Goodwin, who was a really important figure in the British TV and theatre world, film world of writing, he died tragically only 11 years later. Then her daughter, that she gave birth to, she died about the age of 30 of a drug overdose. So there's no one left in her family to look at this book and get really annoyed. But I think they would be very chuffed with that sort of analysis. I mean, he's perfectly free to write whatever he wants, and he's a very accomplished writer, as Mark Crystal. He's written films, directed films, written loads of magazine articles for New Yorker, loads of books about architecture and design, photography, art, you name it. The guy is an impressive writer. But I just feel that he's written it like a man.
Yeah. Should there be, is it a case for a documentary on Pauline?
Well, there's one coming out. You should say that they're about to release one, I think. So her star is finally risen.
Good.
About 50 years after it went into hiding.
And sometimes it takes a book, it takes a catalyst to draw. I mean, she is not a name that I knew at all. I've got to hold my hands up to that. I can't think of any exhibition. I don't think I've ever seen her work in an exhibition. I don't think I've ever seen her work.
No, she has been overlooked since her death. And
Mm.
I'd heard the name, but I didn't really know much about her. But when I was in Lisbon on holiday last October, I went to Berardo Museum. They've
Yeah.
got a whole wing of pop art, American and
Yes.
British, but there's a big section of British pop art. And
Mm.
there's a great painting by Pauline Boty called Celia Birtwell and Some of Her Heroes, which she painted in 1963. And
Yeah.
that's standing there in the gallery next to like Peter Blake and Alan Jones,
Oh, all right. Yeah.
Richard Hamilton, all the great names of British pop art.
Yes.
And it holds its own
Mm.
easily with everybody
Mm.
else's British pop art.
Mm.
It looks fantastic. She was she's been seriously underrated as an artist.
Mm. Well, the other thing that would be wonderful to think could happen then, Graham, is a retrospective exhibition. That maybe a
Well, yeah,
combination of a book and a documentary will lead to that happening.
I think if the documentaries it gets a lot of publicity and is successful,
Mm.
she might eventually get a proper retrospective somewhere major in Britain.
Mm. Mm.
Certainly deserves it.
Absolutely. Now, Graham touched on feminism there. Um, Poor Things, the film of the moment.
Yeah, yeah.
Debating point whether it's a feminist manifesto or not.
Certainly tries to be.
Absolutely. Made by a man, though, interestingly, from a book written by a man and a script written by a man.
Mm. Well, let's not hold it against them.
No. So you've just seen this film this afternoon. So this is freshly minted in your mind, this film.
Have you not seen it, Charles?
Yes, I have. This is why I was so keen last week to
Okay.
say
Well,
that we should look at it this week.
yeah, in that case, you tell me what you think. I'm interested.
Well, I've talked about Little Else all week with Celestine. We've seen a lot
Oh,
of
yeah.
films so far this year, a lot of films.
Yeah.
And this was the most stimulating and thrilling and exciting and extraordinary film we've seen this year. And it
Really?
reminded me why I love film culture. And I don't write about as much. I don't in the way that I used to write
Mm.
about film a lot when I was at the press. It's the thing I obviously write far less about these days. But when you get a film that is as wonderfully made as this, and you celebrate the medium of film and the power of filmmaking, it's obviously had early opinions on the background to it. There's an Alistair Gray novel from 1992. Just to remind everyone, Alistair Gray, Glasgow novelist, described in I think the Guardian when he died as the Renaissance father figure in Scottish literature and art. And the book was set entirely in Glasgow, and that was the first big decision that was made. The only Scottish factor that's retained is that Willem Dafoe's character, who is
Willem Dafoe's accent,
is Willem Dafoe's rather better than Dick Van Dyke, who was on TV this afternoon in Mary Poppins, which I haven't
it
seen
does
for a
sort of
while,
lapse. Yeah.
to remind me of how terrible. But I thought Willem Dafoe's was good.
It lapses in and out of Scottish, doesn't it? He doesn't manage to carry it off fully.
I thought there were fewer cracks in the accent than in the face. Now, so that was the first big decision to be made, was to make this more of a global piece, just to have the one Scottish voice in it. Just a reminder for those of the background of the filmmaker, Yorgos Lanthimos, Greek filmmaker. In recent times, we've had The Favourite, 7 BAFTAs, Lobster,
2018.
and in earlier times before that, he first made his name with perhaps lower scale films, but it's in this case it's a film where he's taken, I think, audacious decisions, but in the company of.
Well, he's not a mild-mannered director.
No, exactly.
He's quite a bold director.
But he's found in Emma Stone a like-minded person who is prepared to be utterly adventurous in her performances. Just a little bit of clarity on that as well. Since this, so that she was in The Favourite. So she was in The Favourite. She's going to be in Kind of Kindness, which is already made. The title may change, but she's already made this with Lanthimos, and also a short film called Bleat. So here is a partnership. I mean, Hitchcock used to have muses in his films, but they used to change. But here is a muse that this director has got that he's working with several times over. And I mean, I think it's nailed. She's a nailed-on award winner for this performance, in that it's such a bold performance. In every way, completely open and uncompromising. The character, well, you can describe who Bella Baxter is and what the circumstances of her becoming who she does, how it happens.
Yeah, Charles, you're entirely right. What you're doing now is you're talking about all the best aspects of Poor Things, of which there are
Mm.
many. I mean, visually, it's absolutely stunning.
Extraordinary. That's from
Absolutely,
James Price
it's
and Shona Heath. Yes.
it's brilliantly made, brilliantly directed,
Yes.
stunning visuals.
Yeah.
Clearly a work of intelligence and art, and the details are superb in all the scenes there are. There's so many visual details in each
Yeah.
single scene. It's amazing. And the performances, the acting's great. Emma Stone's fantastic. Defoe's always great. No matter how old he gets, he still remains the same person he was about 35 years ago. Mark Ruffalo is hilarious as
Absolutely.
one of the suitors of Bella Baxter. He actually laugh out loud at Mark Ruffalo quite a few times. So he's fantastic. So these are all things that I like about the film, and it's definitely bold and it's imaginative. So I should absolutely love it. The trouble is, it's the story. The overall story is basically Mary Shelley's Frankenstein
Yes.
meets Voltaire's Candide. It's
Yes.
the old innocent at large in the big bad world story, except subverted by making the innocent actually a proto-feminist
Yeah.
who is her own woman, who isn't going to be dominated by
A
men.
woman with
Is
no
going to
shame. A
be
woman with no shame.
complete freedom.
Mm.
Well, she shouldn't have any shame. She's not doing anything a man
No.
doesn't do. So but it's basically it's the same film as Little Big Man by
Mhm.
Arthur Penn in 1970,
Yes.
starring Dustin
Yes.
Hoffman. Is the
Yeah.
young guy who wanders the Wild West, going from scene to scene, surrounded by people you can't trust and all the evils of the world, and learning to be strong enough to overcome that. It's the same story as that, except with the feminism chucked on top. And the visuals, although they're stunning, they're basically Guillermo del Toro's Pan's Labyrinth meets
Yes. I
the
can see
Grand
that.
Budapest Hotel by Wes Anderson.
Yeah.
The book that looks like that. And so once you get away from how brilliantly it's made and how bold it is and all the fearless nudity, I mean,
Yes.
in these days for a leading actress like Emma Stone of her stature,
Mm.
to have so much nudity in a film and so
Mm.
much sex shows you what strong personalities both her and
Yeah.
the director are.
Exactly.
That they're willing to like put art above
Mm.
any considerations
Mm.
of anything else. So this is all hugely admirable, but the storyline is basically an opus apart from the feminism, and it's like a comic book storyline or a graphic novel. It's not. There's no complexity. You don't learn anything about the world you didn't already know. The only message of the film seems to be that Emma Stone should be allowed to be a strong woman, behaving as strongly as a man and as free as a man, which is obviously the right message. But
Mm.
that's it. There's nothing to learn. It didn't take me on a dramatic journey. It was a pleasurable, if bizarre, journey. But I didn't feel I'd gone very far intellectually from the beginning of the film. Whereas with the favorite, I thought the favorite was quite a complex script
Mhm.
and quite complex characters and very, very mature and very adult. And bizarrely, I thought this was more of a comic book, but a brilliant comic book.
I'm going to just think on the theme of living without shame.
Mm.
Would we be a better world if we lived without shame? I mean, in this case, so just a reminder again to the listeners, for those who haven't seen it, Bella is given the brain of a baby, and so progresses through into adulthood, but in an adult's body throughout. But she will do childhood behavior and then teenage behavior and whatever. But if we were to live so unemboldened by shame, it's a big question, I guess, but would we be a better world for it?
Well, the film didn't answer any of those questions. And the biggest question to me was that at one point, she was trying to help the poor and she was a bit of a socialist.
Yes.
But then, at the other hand, she was like an individual, a free spirit, a person without shame, almost a person without responsibility. Well, you can't have lack of responsibility and have helping the poor and socialism. Lack of responsibility tends towards someone who isn't going to help the poor and isn't going to be a socialist. So, having raised those good ideas, I didn't feel there was any resolution or any sensible explanation of what it all meant.
Okay, let's see where then perhaps it could have gone that it didn't go.
Well, was it about society? and about women being oppressed by society. And clearly,
Definitely. If you
most
looked
of
at
the male
what happened to the men's journey
were
in the film.
terrible.
I mean, the men's journey in the film, I read a review that made this point. I thought it was a
Mm,
very good
mm,
point, was that whereas she progresses, all the men regress. They don't necessarily become babies, but their behavior becomes infantile or juvenile. And they are, by comparison with her,
mm.
they are very narrow. They're trying to be controlling, and in doing so, it's themselves that they destroy because they can't deal with her freedom.
Yeah, that's true.
Now, I think that's one of the stronger points that's being made in the film. And I do still wonder why
Really?
men so often feel the need to control.
Yeah, but it doesn't explain why they do. So
Well,
what do you learn? You're not learning anything there. It doesn't explain why they do that. It doesn't explain why women quite often put up with it either. It
I
doesn't.
think the film would be a lot duller if
There's no
it. I think the
explanation.
film. Don't you think the film would be duller if it tried to explain it?
I don't
I
mean
mean,
like
but
explaining
I
everything
mean,
because that barely
Ruffalo's
introduces.
character and her, with a spoiler alert, her husband from how she was before. Ruffalo's character obviously is a satire in many ways, but whereas the husband is absolutely vile in every way. But
Yeah.
uh, men, I mean, for me, sitting and watching it, I felt contempt for both those men, and I think I'm meant to feel that. I don't want to behave like they behave.
Oh, obviously, yeah. They are clearly the bad guys. Clearly the bad guys.
Yeah.
I think you hit the nail on the head when you said the word satire. I think that what gets me with the film, which stops me loving it as much as you do, is that it isn't really a drama at all. It's really a satire wrapped inside a sort of like graphic novel. I think that's what it is. It's
I
not
didn't.
really a drama. Whereas The Favourite was a drama, a
Yeah.
full-hearted,
Yes.
complex drama. And this is a totally different beast. This is more like a sort of like Gormenghast adaptation
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
by
Yeah.
Mervyn Peake.
Yeah. I mean,
Which doesn't make it a bad film. In fact, it's an incredible film. It's definitely a remarkable film. It's easily the most striking film centered around a lone woman
yeah.
since Lars von Trier's Breaking the Waves back in
Yes.
1996
Yes.
with Emily Watson. It's really, really strong central character who you do admire. Like you're always rooting for Emma Stone because not only is she fearless, it's more that she's always honest. Her honesty shines throughout the whole film. Whereas the rest of the characters are compromised by their motivations and their desires to be dishonest.
Maybe that's one of the differences. A world without shame might lead to a world with more honesty. We look at so many. The big decision as well that the director took was to remove Alistair Gray's very strong socialist political landscape within the novel. That is totally. He said, and I think I can understand his logic here. He said, as a Greek filmmaker, how could I possibly write about Scottish politics, interpret Scottish politics in the film?
Yeah.
I can't
It's got
do
a point
that.
there.
And I think that's right.
Yeah.
I do think that's fair enough. But you make a broader point there about honesty. And that is where so many people have difficulties in being honest. And we look at politics, which isn't in the film, but ultimately what actually isn't in the film, politics, is still part of the world that she would have to operate in, because every world that we're in pretty well has politics in it. And it's it's dishonesty in relationships, dishonesty in politics. Dishonesty is one of the biggest problems for all of us. Ultimately, you will be trapped by dishonesty. You will be found out by it. And yet repeatedly people go into dishonesty. And the two men are living lies unto themselves, aren't they? They both of them.
Yeah, but that's because they're fitting into society's morals, in society's customs and manners, in society's power politics. So in the real world, it's great that Emma Stone's character in Poor Things is fearlessly honest and fearlessly personal and fearlessly open to challenging all conventions. That's exactly what, in the real world, Pauline Boty tried to do in the early 1960s in Mark Crystal's book. And you know how Pauline Boty was regarded at the time? Even though her art did get some recognition and she did have a couple of solo exhibitions, because she was so attractive and so charismatic and so effervescent and bold and sexy, she got treated by a lot of the male press at the time like a dolly bird, as they would have said then. And so even though she fought to be treated as a serious woman, merely because she looked attractive and was a sexual being, her reputation amongst men who ran the media, and to a large extent the art world as well, was undermined. So in the real world, Emma Stone's character, if she behaved like that, would get in trouble, much, in fact, more trouble than she gets in the film, because
Absolutely.
society can't handle it, because power politics, economic power, is by definition not fair. It's an unequal setup.
I mean, that's what makes it a science fiction or science fantasy black comedy. That's what makes it. Well, Empire called it absolutely batshit, utterly filthy. In fact,
Yeah.
great description. Love that.
Yeah.
I mean, I love things like the character, the surgeon character, which is played by Willem Dafoe. Godwin Baxter is the full name. But of course, she refers to him as God, and I thought that was a very striking moment as well. That again, is he as a scientist playing at being God? I mean, that again wasn't necessarily hugely developed, but she was happy to call him God.
Yeah, well, science has evolved to the point now where, I mean, back in a film with Alec Baldwin in the early 90s, whose name escapes me, he played a doctor, and there's a famous speech in the film where he says, like, "We are gods, doctors are gods." So there's always been the God complex. And, anybody who can save someone's life by rearranging their internal organs is obviously a bit of a godlike figure. Now with science and medicine so evolved, it's getting more and more like that. So it's a fair point to make.
Lanthimos, the other point he said was that it's a story of a woman who has a second chance, and I wonder about that in life. Is that something that actually would be wonderful for us all to have in our lives, a second chance? I mean, many of us, I think, actually do get second chances in our lives. Maybe a relationship doesn't work the first time, one has another relationship, second chance. Maybe one does one career, ends, new career, second chance. Also, I think, and in this case, it's a woman who has the second chance, but I do think in life that is something that we should hopefully all be able to grasp. Second chances, maybe even more chances than that.
It depends how big your mistakes are. Most people's mistakes, if they're not too big, are forgiven and forgotten.
Yes,
because all of us make mistakes. So the way the world works is you have to forgive and forget to a degree. But if they're really big mistakes, people don't forgive and forget it, and you don't always get a second chance from that in real life.
No,
that's not true.
So
The only
again,
people who
that's
seem
part
to
of the
always get
fantasy in
second
this film.
chances are politicians. Our politicians always seem to get a second chance. Doesn't matter what you've done as a politician, you always seem to be able to bounce back some time later.
The irony in that,
Seems to
Graham,
happen quite a bit.
the irony in that is that more often than not, I think that's the one world where they shouldn't be given a second chance.
Bizarre, isn't it? I don't know why it is. I can only think it's because they're quite bedfellows, aren't they? The difference isn't that much. It's not quite real.
No,
politics is an unreal world, which has consequences for the real world.
Exactly, absolutely. On that philosophical thought, Graham, I feel it's time for an interruption.
Yeah, well, the great Hollywood screenwriter William Goldman once said that nobody knows anything in Hollywood, by which he meant you can't guarantee any film's going to be a hit, so therefore no one actually knows anything. So I'm going to adapt that to one of these emails that some firm sent me in my capacity as a hiring advertiser this week, and it was about the most overrated Netflix created TV series and films. And it was sent, of course, by a gambling consortium.
As ever,
website
they're
called
always the ones who
Amazon.
send it these days.
It's always gambling websites that send you bizarre emails which are vaguely interesting. So this one is about Netflix shows or films which were overrated in the opinion of the audience for Netflix material. And this is quite funny. One of the ones which is overrated was called Enola Holmes, a film in 2020 starring Millie Bobby Brown. And wait for this story, because I think this is a story. This is a premise for a film, which I think if you and me had discussed it in a pub, would rejected as being totally rubbish. So the story which got turned to film is based on the premise that Enola Holmes is the younger sister of Sherlock Holmes. Now that's a terrible idea.
That's not good news.
It's one of those box ticking ideas where they think, wait a minute, everyone loves Sherlock Holmes, but we want a younger audience, and we have to be a bit more in touch with modern women. So we'll make him have a younger sister. But Sherlock Holmes' character is a very manly character. They're very male books. Sherlock Holmes isn't really a woman's world because it was written in Victorian times.
Yes.
So the idea that you've got a film based on Sherlock Holmes' younger sister, well, how can that actually fit into what makes Sherlock Holmes popular? I can't see how that was ever going to work.
No. No, exactly. So that only survived a very short time and went. I mean, it's a ridiculous concept, pointless. No, absolute failure. Now, Graham,
Yeah, but simple as decided it made sense.
Yeah, I was rung up by the York Press to comment on a decision that's been taken by York Art Gallery to reintroduce compulsory charging to go to the museum, and that's now a £7 charge just to go into them, and not to go to the cafe or whatever, but to go in and see any of the artworks there at all. There's a 200,000 shortfall at the moment, and it is obviously a big problem. How do you address that situation? But the last time they reintroduced compulsory charging at York Art Gallery, there was a big drop in attendances. And I don't see how, in any way at all, that is not going to happen again this time. And I thought they'd found the right model, which was that you could go into the exhibition, see the permanent displays of York Art Gallery's collection, which is therefore technically, in my view, the collection of art that belongs to the city of York, and you could see that for free. And then you would pay for the special exhibitions that a rotating program of special exhibitions. Now, the dilemma for them is that hasn't produced enough money. But I still wonder, and I'd love to know your thoughts on this, that are they not shooting themselves in the foot by reintroducing a £7 charge to be able to go into the museum, the art gallery at all? The big challenge is to find an alternative to doing that. And that is the difficulty. How, I mean, I've said, because I still don't think it's the right answer what they've done, but I've got to hold my hands up and say, I don't know what is the right answer.
Well, as a theory, the way you think it should be is the way it should be. But in the real world, you've got councils, even down south, who are so short of money thanks to government underfunding for the last 13, 14 years, that they're withdrawing all funding from local theatres and the local arts. So in that context, where councils have got so little money and have got so many important things they're supposed to do, it's very hard to justify them spending loads of money on the arts. So if this works in actually meeting the budget shortfall and keeping the art gallery going, I'd sadly have to support it purely on the basis that if you don't do this, what's going to happen? They'll end up talking about, limited opening hours or even mothballing it. That'll get to that sort of point. So if it works financially, I think it's a good idea. Not that it's a good idea, but if it works financially, they should do it because it's a really tough landscape out there right now.
It is, and yet you can go to the National Railway Museum. Flying Scotsman is back there for, I think, 6 months now, and you can see Flying Scotsman for free. And I think,
come on, all trains are much more important than that, Charles. You know that.
Not my train of thought, Graham. But that one runs out of steam very quickly for me. But I mean, maybe I'm just a naive idealist that I think we have a right within our city to see an art collection. The other thought that comes to mind, and this may be a reckless piece of thinking, but in these circumstances, what do clubs do when they find financial problems? They sell off an asset. Is that an act of heresy, where actually you sell off a work of art that's worth a fortune and you raise money that way?
Again, if you do it irregularly, you end up with no collection, or at least a very impoverished collection. But if it works, it works. So I think what they should really do is get the Flying Scotsman in the art gallery, and that way they get a bigger attendance.
Yeah, it's only there for 6 months.
It'd be like a Magritte painting brought to life in 3D.
Yeah, it would. I mean, it's just very sad. It's on top of all the other ghastly decisions that are having to be taken in the city of York at the moment, with potentially the York Explore, the wonderful library service that we now have across York. Such an admirable library service, and there's potential removal of £600,000. Interestingly, though, the library says it has a watertight contract that means that cannot happen. So that is a watch this space situation. I mean, it's hugely difficult. Obviously, we're looking at a new interesting situation as well in Harrogate. When we're running out of time, Graham, and maybe we can look at this next week actually, which is this decision that Harrogate Theatre is not going to be controlling any longer the programming.
That's a bit of a touchy subject, which has been bubbling away for a couple of years, which I knew about.
Yeah.
But I haven't written about because I support the theatre. I don't want to undermine their own position vis-a-vis North Yorkshire Council. No. But there'll be more to report on that next weekend.
You've been listening to the podcast Two Big Egos in a Small Car. Your hosts were Graham Chalmers and Charles Hutchinson. This was a Baltic sub-production.